Should page 3 end now?
Should page 3 end now? The Sun appeared to have dropped its naked women for 2 or 3 days and then seemed to have given up on the dropping and restored it today. Esther McVeigh, what's your view?
Well, quite frankly, I think for the last couple of weeks we've been talking about press freedoms and how important it is, albeit on far more important issues than that. So I agree with press freedoms. I also wouldn't dictate to anybody what they should choose to do for their career, even if it was something that I wouldn't do. However, I do think times move on, things change, and I would have thought, like old TV programmes that we don't see anymore, I would have thought page 3 would no longer be in the Sun's pages, but in the history pages. And what I'd like to see, actually, on all of the other newspapers on page 3, is powerful women, instead of just being there to be looked at, but actually people who've accomplished, people who've achieved things, women who are engineers, who are scientists, who are IT. I want to see women take their place in the world as people with intelligence and things to offer, not just things to be looked at.
Okay. Paul Nuttall.
Well, firstly, I think it was a great market employ by the Sun to say that they were scrapping page 3 and then bring it back almost the following day, because we're talking about it on this programme. It was on every broadcast outlet. It was in every single newspaper. So, you know, well done to their PR team. Look, the models who pose, they're not coerced into doing it. They earn good money. It's their freedom of choice. And, you know, personally, I would have thought the feminists of this country had more pressing issues, such as the increase in domestic violence. Deal with that. Forced marriages, more than ever before. Female genital mutilation, they should be campaigning against that. There's 40,000 girls in this country who've been mutilated, yet we've now got the first court case, and it's been illegal since the 1980s. It's an absolute disgrace. These are the real issues that feminists should be tackling. Now look, with the Sun, I'm a survivor of the Hillsborough disaster. I made a choice not to buy the Sun newspaper. If you're offended by page 3, you can make that same choice as me. You don't have to buy the Sun.
Okay.
Paul referred to the feminists of Britain. I suppose that's me. Look, there's nothing wrong with pictures of naked women. Art galleries are full of them. The problem with page 3 is partly that it's a little old-fashioned, but also, as a parent, we're going through a period where you're seeing the increasing objectification of women, the increasing almost pornification both of the media and advertising, and I don't want to see a generation of young girls who think the only way to get on in life is to pump their breasts full of silicone and somehow get on page 3. I don't object to nakedness as such. I do object to young girls growing up being given a notion of what it is to be a success, being treated like objects. I'd like to think Mr Murdoch will drop page 3 for once and for all, but I'm not holding my breath.
I just want to say to Paul that feminists are talking about FGM, forced marriage and honour-based violence, and we're talking about no page 3. And we're talking about all of those things, and we want to see change in all of those things, and they're all important.
FGM has been illegal since the 1980s. You know, why hasn't there been a big hoo-ha throughout the 90s about what was going on? And why has it taken to 2015 to have the first court case and the first conviction? I mean, it's an absolute disgrace. Okay. What is going on here?
You know, the first person that got up in Parliament and called for the end of page 3, it's a great woman who's a little forgotten now, Claire Short, and she was abused on the page of The Sun, she was vilified. It's been a long-standing campaign. Younger women have taken it up now, but it's a long-standing campaign. And as for this, either you fight FGM or you fight the objectification of pornification of women. You can do both.
Whoa, hang on.
You can do both.
Look. Right. Whether we like it or not, The Sun is the biggest-selling newspaper in Britain today. I think it sells 3 million a day. You know, if people were that offended by it, 3 million people wouldn't buy it. Let the market decide.
All right,
if everyone's offended, don't buy The Sun.
OK, I'm going to move on.
Who benefits by delaying the publication of the Chilcot report until after the general election?
I mean, I read a column in the Times this morning that said this has got nothing to do with the May 2015 election. This has got everything to do with the May 2015 election. The people who took us into the Iraq War now lead other parties. The fact is, this is highly relevant to how you guys vote in May 2015. And the idea that it's been delayed is a stitch-up, or it gives the appearance of a stitch-up by the establishment, which frankly stinks.
I'm in the armed forces, and I was on the Alfour Peninsula in 2003. There's a quote that goes back to the Falklands. Somebody said, "I'm willing to die for Queen and country, but not for politicians." And I think, maybe speaking for some other people there at the time, you know, maybe we're willing to die for Queen and country, but we're not willing to die for corporations. And if that is the case, then we are going to want to know about it.
Paul Nuttall.
Well, I think it's very convenient for the mainstream political parties, well, obviously not the Liberal Democrats because they voted against, as did Diane, but the mainstream political parties as a whole, that the Chilcot report is released after May, because all it would do, I suspect, if it was released before, it would increase the distrust that the people have in the establishment and the politicians, and I'm sure that the Labour Party in particular would suffer badly as a result of its publication. Now,
but hang on a second. Tony Blair says, and his office says, he regrets the delay in its publication.
Yeah, I'm sure. Is that a pig flying up there? Yeah, OK, I bet he does. Look, the fact is that I suspect...
So you think they're lying when they say this?
Well, I think they are being economical with the truth, as a politician would say.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah, I don't think they're being honest. I think the report would implicate a number of leading Labour politicians, a number of Labour grandees. Indeed, Ed Miliband voted 4 times against such an inquiry taking place. No, that's the establishment protecting the establishment. The Tories voted for this war. I'm guessing that leading establishment figures will also be culpable when the report is released. Let's not forget, this is an Iraq war which cost the lives of 600,000 Iraqi civilians. 179 of our brave British boys and girls who went out in the armed forces never came home. Now, I just hope that the establishment are as concerned about the protection of civilians and our own armed forces as they are about protecting themselves.
Okay. You say here.
Is Nigel Farage right in saying that the National Health Service in its current form will be unaffordable in the future?
Paul Nuttall, you're his deputy. Is he right to say that?
Well, look, I think that at some point in this century, with an ageing population, a growing population, drugs becoming more expensive, we may well have to have a conversation about how we fund healthcare in this country. We're not at that point now, and I want to make it perfectly clear that UKIP is committed to ensuring that the NHS remains in public ownership, state funded and free at the point of delivery. But there are problems within the NHS. We know that. There are structural problems. The fact is that, you know, under Labour, the health budget trebled between 1997 and 2010. But where was the money spent? You know, managers and bureaucrats actually rose in those years by 48%.
Yeah, everybody has their statistics on the NHS. No,
this is important, David, because...
It may be important. I want you to answer Jennifer's question.
Well, I heard it,
which was, you haven't. Is it going to be unaffordable in the future? That was the question.
No,
I was looking ahead.
Because
I noticed that your health spokesman, Louise Bors, says, I'm certain we'll discuss it again, but we'll reject it again. Is the UKIP's view that it should never be subsidised, paid for by insurance, or that it should at some point?
What Louise was talking about is a debate which has happened within the party in 2012, and we may return to having that debate in the future. What Nigel was talking about is whether later in the century we may well have to have a debate how we fund healthcare in this country. And it was something that may well have to happen. The point I want to make is that the NHS, in my opinion, is too large, with 51% of people who work in the NHS not clinically qualified. It's the 3rd largest employer in the world. 1 in every 16 people who work in this country work for the NHS. And, you know...
How do you shrink it if it's too large?
Well, you've got to go like a hot knife through butter through the middle management and bureaucrats that Labour created between 1997 and 2010. And what we need to do is to ensure that, yes, the money is spent, yes, that the health budget goes up, but let's ensure that that money is spent on nurses and doctors and on the front line, not on managers, pen pushers and bureaucrats.
Okay. And the man there behind you, yes.
Yeah, I have to take issue with both Esther and Tim because they're talking complete nonsense when they say that the NHS is fundable in the long term. We're the only developed country in the world that don't have a dual-funded health service, public and private. You look at Western Europe, they have much higher survival rates, they have better treatments, they have less waiting lists, and they have that because they have a dual-funded public and private system. And we need to have mature politicians who are prepared to put their head above the parapet and have that debate.
Right. When the man there made his point about other examples in Europe, there was quite a lot of applause here in the audience about the idea of a mixture of private and public. What do you say to that? I mean, you heard the applause for what he said.
And this is part of the debate that we said we'd need to have. How do we fund it? Hang on, how do we fund it? Well, we know we've got the private sector in there already by 5%. Labour introduced it. We know it's already there.
The man in spectacles there.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, when the gentleman down there spoke about dual systems, I thought I saw Paul nodding away in agreement. Maybe think back to when you said sometime in the next 100 years UKIP will talk about this and make a decision. What about in the next 5 years, just so that we know? You know, would you be changing things in the next 5 years?
You know, let me just make... I'm very happy, actually, that we're having a civilised debate about the NHS, because usually what happens is that you talk about dual systems, and even if you mention the word privatisation, you know, the Labour Party's eyes begin to swivel and they all begin to foam at the mouth and they all shout, American system, American system. And it's nonsense. No one's talking about an American system. What we're saying is, you know, there should be no sacred cows in British politics. Everything should be up for discussion, because if you don't discuss things, things don't improve. And what you're doing, in effect, is you're letting down the British public.
Sorry, just a second. If you're the no sacred cows, you're saying you won't protect the NHS, then? They're not a sacred cow to UKIP?
I don't believe that anything should be a sacred cow in British politics. Politics is fluid. Everything should be up for discussion, and that also includes the National Health Service. But I want to make it clear, we had this internal discussion within the party in 2012, and in our manifesto will be a commitment to keep the NHS in public hands, funded by the state and free at the point of delivery.
How do you know what's going to be in your manifesto? You just sacked the person who's right.
No, hang on. No, I've got to come back on this. Please. David, you're falling for another media load of tosh. We never sacked Tim Aker as the head of policy. Tim resigned 3 weeks ago. He actually put it out in a tweet because he's become a councillor in Thurrock, he's an MEP, and he's also in one of our top 5 target seats. The job was too big. It's now been given to Susan Evans, and our manifesto is progressing quite nicely, thank you.
Why are the SNP, who lost the referendum, having so much say in British politics?
Why the SNP? We had Nicola Sturgeon, SNP leader, saying that she was going to vote on, her MPs would vote on English issues when they came back to Parliament, and they seem to be, they're going to now be in the debates, we're told, though we haven't heard the official announcement yet. At the top there, yes, at the very back.
Doesn't this contradict the draft paper that gives Westminster the power to veto Scotland's decisions on their own welfare system?
Doesn't what? The arrangements that have been made, that have been announced today?
Yes,
Paul Nuttall.
Well, you know, I'm going to say it, and I'm guessing it's what most people in England are thinking. I am absolutely sick to death of Salmond, Sturgeon and the SNP. And I'll tell you why. Firstly, they lost that referendum. And secondly, you know, with them, it's take. And we never get anything back. And you know what they're taking? They're taking your tax. You know, people in Scotland get an extra £1,600 than people, more than people in England. And you know what that pays for, your taxation up there? It pays for them not to have tuition fees. Whereas down here, we charge students £9,000 a year. They have free hospital car parking. Down here, we pay. They have free prescriptions. Down here, we pay. When devolution happened, they got themselves a parliament. The English got nothing.
So what are you going to do when they win all the seats that are predicted that they're going to win and hold the balance of power at Westminster, which UKIP, I think, is not going to?
Hang on. But nothing is ever enough for them, is it? Because you've got Sturgeon now saying that Scottish MPs are going to vote on issues that only affect England. It's absolutely appalling. And, you know, they've got Devo Max now, and they've only got Devo Max because of one roll poll in August, which spooked the three amigos, Cameron, Clegg and Miliband, who then scuttled up to Edinburgh and basically gave them everything they wanted in a bribe not to go independent.
Okay.
So, no, hang on, I've just got a clear point here, because the fact is that in Parliament, English MPs should vote on English-only issues. And that should be the first step, in effect, to moving towards a fully fledged English Parliament.
That's the right. Yes.
We seem to be heading for more coalition governments. Shouldn't we know before we vote in May who's prepared to work with who? Because we want to know if we're going to be voting for the SNP. Because, let's face it, they lost the election up in Scotland and they seem to be calling the tune at the moment.
My first point is, I'm sure many other English people would not want Paul Nuttall to speak for us and say that we're all sick to death of the SNP. I certainly don't feel like that. And in a week where we've commemorated the oldest democracy in the world, surely we're still in an environment where the SNP are allowed to vote on what they want. I'm not au fait with the rules of Parliament, but I believe they're allowed to vote on what they want, and we should keep that the same.
No, they are allowed, but at the moment we have two tiers of MP. So, for example, people like Diane and Tim and Esther, they can't vote on devolved issues in Scotland, but Scottish MPs can vote on issues that only affect England. We've got a problem with the UK, and I believe if the UK is going to survive into this century, then what we need is some sort of federal UK where it's rebalanced and it has equality for everyone, the English, the Scottish, the Welsh and the Northern Irish.
Paul, thank you very much. Now, I'm sorry, our time's up.